This question comes from Sock, who asks, what would the world be like if the continents stayed the same, but the whole map was rotated 90 degrees? That's not just a cartographic curiosity. It would completely transform life on Earth, and it would have a surprisingly large impact on the weirdly Minnesota-centric world of 1990s cinema. Let us be clear, we are not messing with the Earth and axial tilt or how it orbits the Sun. Instead, we reimagining that the entire surface of the Earth has been shifted, rotated 90 degrees around the globe so that the spots that are currently at the poles are now on the equator. For reference, we'll say that the new equator follows the old prime meridian, the Greenwich line. So now, the Indian Ocean sits squarely at the North Pole, while the coast of Ecuador is parked at the South Pole. And we're going to assume that this world developed naturally over millions of years, long enough for ecosystems, climate zones, and weather patterns to adapt to their new surroundings. What would that look like? Where would deserts form? What about rainforests? Where would people go for beach vacations, or to chase tornadoes? Climate is complex, deeply influenced by ocean currents, mountain ranges, jet streams, and heat circulation in the atmosphere. But we can still make some sweeping predictions based on basic principles of planetary physics. First, a quick crash course. The Sun delivers the most heat at the equator. Hot air rises there and flows toward the poles high in the atmosphere, while cooler air sinks at the poles and returns to the equator at the surface. This creates a circulation pattern known as a Hadley cell. But the atmosphere's circulation isn't made up of just one loop per hemisphere. It's divided into three: the Hadley cell, near the equator, the Ferrel cell, in mid-latitudes, and the polar cell, near the poles. In our rotated world, let's assume the same general structure applies. So we'd still get a range of climate zones, from tropical to temperate to polar, just in very different places. Let's visualize this rotated world. Imagine a new map, with frozen zones clustered near the new poles and pockets of permafrost in the highest mountains. Next, we sprinkle in the green zones, lush forests and steaming jungles near the equator, deserts at the dry outer edges of the Hadley cells, and more variable climates in the temperate zones where Ferrel cells stir up seasonal chaos. Surface winds, driven by the Coriolis effect, flow east to west in the tropics and west to east in mid-latitudes, shaping rainfall, storm tracks, and climate. Rain falls where warm, moist air rises, so the equator stays rainy and full of life. But where air descends, cool and dry, we find deserts. These dry bands form near 30-degree latitude in both hemispheres, often called the horse latitudes, for reasons involving stranded ships, dehydration, and, allegedly, jettisoned livestock. Now let's play weather god and sketch in the winds, the deserts, the monsoons, and maybe a few new hurricane basins. For fun, let's guess what time zones would look like. Oddly enough, New York City doesn't move much. It stays in the same time zone and still gets hit by hurricanes. Sorry, New York. Now let's zoom into the continents and explore what happens in this twisted version of Earth. North America is flipped upside down, climatically at least. The former tropics of Central America are now covered in glaciers, while the icy Arctic becomes a hot, tropical coastline. Hurricanes now threaten Greenland, Baffin Island, and the Canadian Maritimes. As warm, tropical air from the new Baffin Bay collides with cold, dry air coming down from the Rockies, we get a brand new tornado alley, centered in the prairie lands around the rebranded Hudson Bay. South America ends up feeling a lot like Europe. Brazil's coast becomes temperate and mild, with wide grasslands and boreal forests spreading across the continent. To the south, that greenery gives way to frozen tundra and massive glaciers cutting through the Andes, now a formidable icy wall separating the continent from the polar seas. And the mighty Amazon, once Earth's dominant river, becomes a modest Mississippi. Asia experiences a similar reversal. Siberia is now a warm, tropical coast, while India and Southeast Asia turn into the new Siberia, cold, dry, and windswept. The Gobi Desert is no longer sheltered by the Himalayas, but it doesn't exactly become a rainforest either. It's just a different kind of barren. Europe becomes Southeast Asia. Great Britain and Ireland now resemble Sumatra and Borneo, hot, humid, and mosquito-friendly. Iceland becomes our version of the Philippines. The Alps, now sitting on the equator, are the only spot there with permanent equatorial glaciers. Central Europe takes on the lush, steamy chaos of New Guinea. Africa has rotated too. The former West becomes equatorial rainforest. The East, dry, desolate desert. In our world, North America dominates the global tornado count. But here, with Africa's new position and geography, it could easily become the tornado capital of the world. Australia gets a good deal. It's cooler, wetter, and greener, especially in the west, which was once bone dry. And Antarctica. Oh, Antarctica wins big. Without its ice cap and polar location, it's now blanketed in thick highland rainforest with tropical weather and vibrant ecosystems. McMurdo Station becomes a beachfront paradise. And if the researchers get homesick for icy hellscapes, they can always request a transfer to Costa Rica. Let's check in on the world's biggest cities. Some don't make it. Mexico City, now perched high in the polar mountains, is buried beneath ice. Jakarta is transformed into a lonely, frozen rock in the far north. Kolkata and Delhi are sealed off from the rest of the world by Himalayan glaciers. Hong Kong, Manila, Karachi, and Mumbai all become Arctic cities with climates similar to Anchorage or Reykjavik. Cold, windy, and very damp. The oceans are chilly but not fully frozen. Some cities remain surprisingly livable. Seoul, Osaka, Tokyo, Shanghai, and New York City maintain climates not too different from what they had before, though Shanghai gets a bit colder, and most of them become milder and much wetter, especially Seoul. Cairo, now farther south, is surrounded by savanna and rainforest at the mouth of the Nile. São Paulo and Buenos Aires cool off a little, ending up with climates somewhere between New England and regular Old England. Los Angeles becomes one of the rainiest places in the U.S., with moisture-laden winds hitting the San Gabriel Mountains, basically a super-soaked version of Seattle. Other cities, they get scorched. Moscow turns into a desert furnace, something like a cross between Phoenix and Baghdad. London, meanwhile, is reborn in a tropical jungle. The Thames is teeming with piranhas, the air is thick with heat and humidity, and spicy curry finally matches the weather. It's also the only place on Earth where tigers politely apologize before attacking. Remember that 90s cinema reference? Here's what that was about. Imagine this global rotation didn't happen over millions of years, but instantly, magically. Let's say the continents just slide into their new positions without any tsunamis or earthquakes. Still, it would be an absolute catastrophe. The ice caps would melt long before new ones could form, raising sea levels by hundreds of feet. Climate zones would shift overnight. Ecosystems would collapse. Species would go extinct en masse. But if you timed it just right, and if Michael Bay were directing, then as the Gulf of Mexico chilled and the Mississippi River became a wide, salty estuary, wildlife would begin to spread inland. One morning, our favorite Minnesotans from 90s movies would wake up to rafts of fire ants, followed by 5 million lost, hungry alligators swarming across their freshly thawed backyard hockey rinks. It would be a whole new nightmare for the cast of Grumpy Old Men, and a very different ending for Fargo.